What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved stars walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a friendly conversation, and instead finds herself in the middle of a tense, unpredictable confrontation that no one in the studio was prepared for? The cameras are already rolling. The lights burn bright across the stage of The View. The audience buzzes with anticipation, that soft murmur that fills the room before something memorable happens. No one knows it yet, but this morning is about to become one of the most talked about interviews in daytime television history. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, like this video, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Because what unfolds next is the kind of moment that spreads across the internet in minutes. The familiar theme music fades. Applause erupts as the hosts walk out one by one, smiling, waving, soaking in the energy of the crowd. At the center of the panel sits the legendary moderator, Whoopi Goldberg. Calm, confident, a veteran of countless heated discussions and celebrity interviews. She adjusts her glasses slightly as the audience settles, her expression relaxed but attentive. Today's guest is someone the crowd clearly adores. From the moment the announcer's voice echoes through the studio, please welcome Academy Award nominee, Margot Robbie. The energy in the room explodes. Margot walks out with that effortless charisma the world has come to love. She's smiling, waving, her presence bright and warm under the lights. The audience rises to their feet in a standing ovation. She laughs lightly as she reaches the panel, greeting the hosts one by one. Thank you, she says, slightly overwhelmed by the applause. Whoopi smiles politely as Margot takes her seat. Good to have you here, Whoopi says in her calm, unmistakable voice. It's so nice to be here, Margot replies. For the first few minutes, everything feels exactly as viewers would expect. The conversation flows easily, discussing Margot's latest film, the intense preparation behind her role, and the whirlwind of global premieres that have followed. Joyful laughter echoes from the audience as Margot tells a light-hearted story about a stunt gone wrong during filming. I promise, she says with a playful grin. The bruises looked worse than they felt. The hosts chuckle, but sitting quietly beside her, Whoopi watches carefully. She has interviewed thousands of celebrities over the years, and she has a way of sensing when a conversation is about to turn. Soon the discussion shifts. One of the co-hosts brings up the film's themes, specifically the social commentary that critics have been debating online. That's actually sparked a lot of conversation, the host says. Some people say the film is making a strong statement about power and influence. Margot nods thoughtfully. That was definitely part of the intention, she says. The story's meant to spark dialogue. At that moment, Whoopi leans forward slightly. Her tone remains calm, but there's a sharpness in her words. Well, dialogue is one thing, she says. But some folks feel like Hollywood sometimes tells people how they're supposed to think. The room grows quieter. Margot blinks, clearly considering the comment. She smiles politely at first. Well, I don't think it's about telling people how to think, she says carefully. I think storytelling just reflects conversations people are already having. Whoopi tilts her head. Sometimes, she says slowly, but sometimes it feels a little preachy. A few murmurs ripple through the audience. Margot keeps her composure, but something subtle changes in her expression. Her posture straightens slightly. Well, she replies gently, I think audiences are smart enough to make up their own minds. The tension is faint, but real. One of the co-hosts senses it and tries to lighten the moment. So Margot, she says brightly, your performance has been getting incredible reviews. But Whoopi interrupts. Let me ask something directly. Now the studio grows very still. Margot turns toward her. Whoopi folds her hands on the table. You're an incredibly talented actress, she says. But do you ever worry that celebrities, especially big Hollywood stars, step into political conversations without really understanding the people they're speaking about? A ripple of surprised whispers moves through the crowd. Margot pauses. For the first time since the interview began, the smile fades slightly from her face. She chooses her words carefully. I think everyone has a right to speak about issues they care about, she says calmly. Whoopi nods, but her expression remains skeptical. Sure, she replies. But sometimes it feels like celebrities talk at people instead of with them. The temperature in the room shifts. The audience senses it immediately. Margot takes a breath. Well, I'd hope that when I speak about something, it comes from listening first. There's a quiet firmness in her voice now. Whoopi studies her. For a moment, neither woman speaks. The silence stretches just long enough for viewers watching at home to lean closer to their screens. One of the co-hosts glances nervously toward the producers behind the cameras. But Whoopi isn't finished. So let me ask you this, she continues. Do you think actors sometimes use their platform without fully understanding the impact? Margot's eyes sharpen slightly. She doesn't laugh this time. Instead, she leans forward just a little. Respectfully, she says, I think actors are also citizens, and citizens should be allowed to care about the world around them. A few people in the audience clap softly. Whoopi raises an eyebrow. Oh, absolutely, she says. But when you've got millions of followers listening to every word, that responsibility gets bigger. Margot nods. I agree. Whoopi waits. Margot continues. That's exactly why it matters to speak carefully and honestly. The exchange feels polite on the surface, but underneath it, tension is building. The kind of tension that producers quietly dread and viewers secretly hope for. The audience shifts in their seats. Some are smiling nervously. Others are watching with intense focus. Because something about the conversation feels different now. Less like a friendly interview, and more like the beginning of a debate. Whoopi leans back in her chair. She studies Margot again, this time with a hint of curiosity. You're standing your ground, she says. Margot smiles faintly. I try to. A few laughs break the tension, but not completely. Then Whoopi asks the question that will change the entire tone of the interview. All right then, she says. Let's talk about something specific. Margot's attention sharpens. Whoopi glances briefly toward the audience before turning back to her guest. Because some of the comments you made recently, she says slowly, sparked a lot of strong reactions. Now the room feels electric. Margot's expression grows more serious. Which comments? She asks. Whoopi folds her hands again. The ones about how Hollywood should influence social change. The audience murmurs. Margot exhales quietly. I remember saying storytelling can inspire change, she says. Whoopi nods. And that's where some people disagreed. Margot looks directly at her now. And that's okay, she replies. There's a subtle shift in tone, more confidence, more edge. The hosts glance at one another. The atmosphere has officially changed. What began as a routine celebrity interview is slowly transforming into something far more intense. And everyone in the studio can feel it. Whoopi leans forward again. Well, she says calmly, let's explore that idea a little deeper. Margot tilts her head. I'd love to. The audience gasps softly. Because now it's clear. Neither woman intends to back down. And what happens next is the moment this interview truly explodes. For a moment, the studio sits in a strange silence. Not the comfortable pause of a casual interview, but the kind of quiet that forms when everyone senses something bigger is unfolding. Across the table on The View, Whoopi Goldberg studies her guest with the calm patience of someone who has navigated decades of heated conversations on live television. Across from her, Margot Robbie remains composed, though the brightness that filled her entrance moments earlier has shifted into something more focused. Her shoulders are straight now. Her hands rest calmly on the table, but there's a subtle tension in the way her fingers lace together. The audience can feel it. What started as a discussion is now becoming a challenge. Whoopi breaks the silence first. So, she says evenly, you mentioned storytelling inspiring change. Margot nods once. Yes. Whoopi tilts her head. But inspiration and influence aren't always the same thing. A few audience members shift in their seats. Margot waits, sensing where the conversation is going. Whoopi continues. Sometimes, she says, people feel like Hollywood, actors, studios, big celebrities, start telling audiences what the right way to think is. Margot lets out a quiet breath before answering. I think stories present ideas, she says carefully. But the audience decides what they believe. Whoopi taps a finger lightly on the table. But when millions of people admire you, when they follow you, when your words get replayed everywhere. She leans slightly closer. You don't think that carries a kind of power? Margot doesn't hesitate. Of course it does. The audience murmurs softly. Whoopi raises an eyebrow. So then shouldn't celebrities be more careful about stepping into debates that affect everyday people? Margot smiles faintly, but there's determination behind it. I think everyone should be careful when they speak publicly, she says. Celebrities included. Whoopi nods slowly. But do you think actors sometimes speak with more confidence than knowledge? The question lands harder than the others. A few audience members gasp quietly. Margot pauses this time. She glances briefly toward the audience, then back to Whoopi. I think that can happen in any profession, she says. A small ripple of applause breaks out. Whoopi notices it. She leans back slightly, folding her arms. Well, she says, that's a fair answer. But the look in her eyes suggests she isn't finished. One of the co-hosts shifts uncomfortably in her chair. The producers behind the cameras exchange glances. They know this tone. The conversation is balancing on the edge of something unpredictable. Whoopi leans forward again. You've spoken before about wanting Hollywood to push society forward, she says. Margot nods. Yes. Whoopi's voice stays calm. But not everyone agrees on what forward means. Margot's expression grows thoughtful. That's true. So how does Hollywood decide what direction is forward? Whoopi asks. The audience becomes very quiet again. Margot rests her hands on the table. Well, she says slowly, Hollywood doesn't decide that. Whoopi watches closely. People do. A few audience members clap softly again. Whoopi tilts her head. But the stories Hollywood tells shape those conversations. Margot nods. Yes. Stories reflect culture. Or influence it, Whoopi replies. Margot's eyes sharpen slightly. Both can be true. The exchange is calm. Measured. But the tension continues to build with every sentence. From the audience, someone whispers, "Oh wow." Whoopi glances briefly toward the crowd before returning her gaze to Margot. You know, she says, I've been in this business a long time. Margot smiles respectfully. I know. And I've watched Hollywood go through a lot of phases, Whoopi continues. Sometimes actors use their platform to listen, and sometimes they use it to lecture. A murmur spreads across the room. Margot's smile fades slightly. Do you think I'm lecturing people? She asks. The directness of the question catches everyone off guard. Even Whoopi pauses. The audience leans forward. Whoopi chooses her response carefully. I think sometimes, she says slowly, Hollywood forgets that the people watching at home live very different lives. Margot nods slowly. I agree with that. The answer surprises Whoopi. Really, she says. Margot nods again. Absolutely. The room grows quieter. Margot continues. I grew up far away from Hollywood, she says. And I know the industry can sometimes feel like a bubble. A few audience members clap again. Whoopi watches her closely. But recognizing that doesn't mean artists should stay silent, Margot adds. Now the applause becomes louder. Whoopi raises an eyebrow. You're pretty confident about that. Margot shrugs slightly. I just believe storytelling matters. Whoopi taps the table again. But does it give actors authority on issues they didn't study or experience firsthand? Margot's voice becomes firmer now. I don't think speaking about something means claiming authority. The audience reacts again, half clapping, half murmuring. Whoopi nods slowly. But millions of people treat celebrity opinions like authority. Margot leans slightly forward. Then maybe the real conversation, she says, should be about how audiences interpret influence. That answer draws a louder reaction from the crowd. Some clap. Others whisper. The hosts glance at each other again. The tension is no longer subtle. It's the kind of moment that feels like a turning point. Whoopi studies Margot for a long second. Then she smiles faintly. You're good at this, she says. Margot laughs lightly. I'm just having a conversation. Whoopi chuckles. Oh, it's definitely a conversation. But then she adds something that changes the energy again. But I'm not sure everyone at home will see it that way. Margot tilts her head. What do you mean? Whoopi gestures toward the cameras. Well, the internet tends to pick sides. The audience laughs nervously. Margot smiles. That's true. But sometimes, Whoopi continues, those sides get very loud. Margot nods slowly. I'm aware of that. Whoopi leans forward again. So let me ask something very directly. The room goes silent again. Margot watches her carefully. Do you believe Hollywood should actively push political or social ideas, even if half the audience disagrees? The question hangs in the air like a spark near gasoline. Margot's expression shifts. For the first time in the interview, her answer comes with unmistakable conviction. I believe stories should challenge people, she says. The audience reacts immediately, some cheering, others whispering. Whoopi's eyes narrow slightly with interest. Challenge them how? Margot meets her gaze. By asking questions that make people think. Whoopi leans back slowly. And if those questions make people angry? Margot doesn't hesitate. Then maybe those are the questions worth asking. The audience erupts into a mix of applause and surprised laughter. One of the co-hosts mutters under her breath. Wow. Whoopi watches Margot for a long moment. The calm moderator who has handled decades of fiery debates now looks genuinely intrigued. Because this interview has officially transformed. It's no longer about a movie. It's no longer about promotion. It has become something else entirely. A battle of ideas. And just when it seems the tension might ease, Whoopi asks the one question that will push the conversation into completely unexpected territory. "All right," she says slowly. Margot looks at her. Whoopi folds her hands again. "Then let's talk about the moment your comments last month caused a huge backlash." The audience gasps. Margot's eyebrows rise slightly. The room suddenly feels smaller, because everyone watching knows exactly what moment she's talking about. And now, the real confrontation is about to begin. The atmosphere inside the studio of The View changes the moment those words leave Whoopi Goldberg's mouth. You can almost feel the air tighten. The audience, which had been reacting with scattered applause and nervous laughter, suddenly grows very still. A few people exchange glances. Others lean forward in their seats. Because now the conversation isn't theoretical anymore. It's personal. Across the table, Margot Robbie sits motionless for a brief second, her expression composed but alert. She clearly understands what Whoopi is referring to. The comments that had exploded across social media weeks earlier, igniting headlines, debates, and endless online arguments. Margot takes a slow breath. "Which backlash?" she asks calmly. A soft ripple of murmurs moves through the audience. Whoopi adjusts her glasses slightly. "The interview where you said Hollywood shouldn't be afraid to challenge audiences," she replies. "Some people interpreted that as you saying people who disagree with certain social ideas are just behind the times." Margot's eyebrows lift slightly. "I never said that," she replies immediately. The response comes quicker than anything she's said so far. Whoopi tilts her head. "But a lot of people felt that's what you meant." Margot's voice stays steady. Feeling something and it being said are two different things. A low wave of reaction spreads across the audience. Someone claps. Someone else whispers, "Oh." Whoopi notices. She leans forward again, her voice calm but pointed. "So you're saying the audience misunderstood you?" Margot pauses before answering. "I'm saying context matters." That answer lands like a carefully placed chess move. The co-hosts glance at each other again. The energy in the room is now unmistakable. What started as a polite discussion has turned into a sharp exchange of ideas, and neither woman is backing away. Whoopi nods slowly. "Context does matter," she says. "But so does impact." Margot meets her gaze. "I agree. Then shouldn't public figures take responsibility when their words create division?" Whoopi asks. The question sparks a sudden murmur from the crowd. Margot rests her hands on the table again, thinking for a moment before she speaks. "I think responsibility also means clarifying what you meant," she says. Whoopi raises an eyebrow. "And did you clarify it?" Margot's answer comes without hesitation. "Yes." Some audience members clap again. Others remain silent. The studio now feels split, like two invisible sides have formed in the room. Whoopi notices that too. She glances briefly toward the audience before returning to Margot. She says, "This is exactly what people talk about when they say celebrity conversations can feel disconnected." Margot tilts her head slightly. "How so?" Whoopi gestures with her hand. "Well, when people hear a celebrity talk about pushing society forward, some folks feel like they're being told they're standing in the way." The audience murmurs louder now. Margot listens carefully. "I understand why someone might feel that," she says slowly. That answer surprises some people in the room. But Margot continues. "Change can feel uncomfortable," she says. "That doesn't mean the conversation shouldn't happen." A burst of applause erupts from one side of the audience. Another section stays quiet. Whoopi leans back slightly, watching the reaction. "You see that?" she says, gesturing toward the crowd. Half the room loves that answer. The other half isn't so sure. Margot glances toward the audience, then back at Whoopi. That's the point of dialogue. The line draws another reaction, this time louder. Someone whistles. Someone else claps enthusiastically. But Whoopi's expression remains thoughtful. "You're very confident in that belief," she says. Margot nods. "I am." Whoopi folds her arms again. "But let me challenge that for a second." The audience quiets immediately. Whoopi continues. "Sometimes when celebrities talk about social issues, people feel like they're being judged by people who live completely different lives." Margot listens without interrupting. Whoopi goes on. "You live in Hollywood," she says. "A world with incredible privilege and influence. Do you think that changes how people hear your message? Margot nods slowly. Yes. The simple answer catches Whoopi off guard. You do? Yes, Margot says. Of course it does. The audience murmurs again. Margot continues, her voice calm but firm. But privilege doesn't mean you should stay silent about things that matter. A wave of applause rolls through the studio. Whoopi smiles slightly. Fair point. But she's not finished. However, she adds, some people would argue that actors should focus on acting. The audience laughs nervously. Margot laughs too, but there's a sharpness in her eyes now. With respect, she says, people say that to musicians, athletes, and artists all the time. Whoopi nods. They do. Margot leans forward slightly. But nobody tells business leaders or billionaires to stay out of public conversations. That line hits the room like a lightning bolt. The audience explodes with reactions, loud clapping, surprised laughter, and even a few gasps. One of the co-hosts quietly mutters, "Wow." Whoopi's eyebrows rise. Now even she looks impressed. That's an interesting point, she admits. Margot shrugs lightly. I just think everyone with a platform should be thoughtful about how they use it. The applause grows louder, but the tension between the two women is still there. Whoopi leans forward again. All right, she says. Let me ask you something personal. Margot nods. Okay. Whoopi studies her carefully. Did you expect this much controversy from your comments? Margot pauses. For the first time, she looks genuinely reflective. No, she says quietly. The audience listens closely. I expected discussion, she continues. But the scale of the reaction surprised me. Whoopi nods slowly. That's the internet for you. The audience laughs. Margot smiles faintly. But the reaction also proved something, she adds. Whoopi tilts her head. What's that? Margot looks directly at her. That people care deeply about these conversations. The room goes quiet again. Even Whoopi seems to pause for a moment, because the tone of the discussion has shifted once more. It's no longer confrontational. Now it feels like two people genuinely debating ideas. But just when the tension seems like it might finally ease, one of the co-hosts glances down at a tablet. Her eyes widen slightly. Whoopi, she says carefully. Whoopi turns toward her. Yes. The co-host hesitates. Social media is already blowing up about this interview. The audience reacts instantly, excited murmurs spreading across the room. Whoopi laughs softly. Well, she says, that was fast. The co-host continues. I mean really blowing up. Margot raises an eyebrow. How bad is it? She asks. The co-host turns the tablet slightly toward Whoopi. Whoopi looks down. Then she chuckles. Oh boy. The audience leans forward. What? Someone shouts from the crowd. Whoopi looks back at Margot. Let's just say, the internet has definitely picked sides. The audience erupts with laughter and applause. Margot shakes her head, smiling. Already? Whoopi nods. Oh yes. She gestures toward the cameras. And we're still live. The realization sends another ripple of excitement through the studio. Because everyone knows what that means. This conversation, this unexpected, tense, fascinating exchange, is no longer just happening inside this room. It's spreading across the internet in real time. Clips are being shared. Comments are flooding in. And the debate between Margot Robbie and Whoopi Goldberg is about to become one of the most talked about moments in the history of The View. But the most shocking part of the story is what happens after the cameras stop rolling. The moment the final commercial break ends on The View, the energy in the studio feels completely different from the beginning of the show. What started as a routine celebrity interview has turned into something far bigger. The audience can feel it. Even the production crew behind the cameras seems unusually alert, watching every movement on the stage. Some of them are already glancing down at their phones, seeing the wave of reactions flooding in online. At the table, Whoopi Goldberg sits calmly, her expression thoughtful as she listens to the producer counting down quietly in her earpiece. Across from her, Margot Robbie remains composed, though there's a new awareness in her eyes now. She knows the conversation they just had wasn't just another interview moment. It was the kind of exchange that spreads across the internet in minutes. The red light on the camera flicks on again. They're live. Whoopi turns toward the audience with the relaxed smile viewers know so well. Well, she says lightly, this has turned into quite a conversation today. The audience laughs and applauds. Some clap enthusiastically. Others exchange looks that say the same thing. Did that really just happen? Margot smiles as well, though there's a thoughtful edge to it now. I didn't expect this when I walked out here, she admits. That line draws a big laugh from the crowd. Whoopi chuckles too. Honestly, she says, neither did we. The moment softens the atmosphere slightly, but the weight of the discussion still lingers in the room. Whoopi turns back toward Margot. I appreciate you sticking with the conversation, she says sincerely. Margot nods. I appreciate you asking real questions. The audience responds with a warm round of applause. For a second, the tension that had built throughout the interview seems to dissolve. But then one of the co-hosts speaks up again, holding her tablet. So, just for context, she says carefully, the clips from this conversation are already trending. The audience gasps. Whoopi shakes her head with a laugh. That fast? Oh yeah, the co-host replies. She glances down again. People are arguing about it everywhere. Margot raises an eyebrow. That sounds about right. The audience laughs again. But the co-host keeps reading. Some viewers are saying this was one of the most honest conversations they've seen on daytime TV, she says. Applause breaks out across the studio. Others, she adds carefully, are saying celebrities should stay out of social debates. The reaction this time is mixed, some applause, some murmurs. Whoopi nods slowly. That's the beauty of discussion, she says. People see things differently. Margot leans slightly forward. And hopefully they keep talking about it, she adds. The audience claps again. But the real storm isn't inside the studio anymore. It's outside. Within minutes, clips from the debate between Margot Robbie and Whoopi Goldberg are spreading across social media like wildfire. On video platforms, one moment goes viral immediately. The instant Margot says, "Nobody tells billionaires to stay out of public conversations." That line is replayed again and again. Some viewers cheer the comment, praising Margot for standing her ground. Others defend Whoopi's questions, saying she raised an important point about celebrity influence. News outlets begin publishing headlines before the show even finishes airing. Margot Robbie and Whoopi Goldberg's heated debate sparks online firestorm. Did Margot Robbie win the argument on The View? Hollywood, influence, and responsibility. The interview everyone is talking about. Inside the studio, however, the mood is far calmer now. Whoopi glances toward Margot again. You handled yourself well, she says. Margot smiles. So did you. The audience reacts warmly to the mutual respect between them. Because despite the tension, despite the sharp questions and confident answers, the exchange never turned hostile. It remained something rare on television. A real debate. Whoopi turns to the audience. You know, she says thoughtfully, these conversations matter, even when they get uncomfortable. The audience applauds again. Margot nods. I think uncomfortable conversations are usually the ones worth having. The applause grows louder. One audience member even stands up briefly to clap. Whoopi smiles at the reaction. Well, she says, I think the internet is going to be talking about this one for a while. Margot laughs softly. I'm sure they will. The show begins wrapping up. But the buzz in the studio continues. Even after the cameras cut and the audience begins filing out, people are still discussing what they just witnessed. Some say Margot was bold. Others say Whoopi asked the questions many people were thinking. But almost everyone agrees on one thing. It was unforgettable. And later that evening, the clips dominate online conversation. Debate videos appear everywhere. Comment sections explode with arguments and opinions. Some viewers call it one of the most refreshing interviews in recent talk show history. Others say it proves how divided public discussions have become. But whether people agreed with Margot Robbie or with Whoopi Goldberg, everyone is talking about it. And that's exactly what makes moments like this live forever on the internet. Now we want to hear your opinion. Who do you think made the stronger points in this tense interview? Was Margot Robbie right to defend celebrities speaking out? Or did Whoopi Goldberg raise the more important questions about influence and responsibility? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read them all. And if you enjoyed this dramatic deep dive into one of the most explosive celebrity interviews on television, make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Stage View for more intense, cinematic stories about the biggest celebrity moments that everyone is talking about. Because on Stage View, the drama behind the spotlight is only just beginning.